Welcome, welcome, welcome to the premiere of Channel 3 Halifax. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. I'm thrilled to have my guests tonight, and we're going to talk about storytelling. Last week, when we had a team meeting talking about tonight's episode and launching today's series, the question came up, well, maybe I should introduce the station by talking about what Channel 3 Halifax is all about. And I thought that was a very good question. And I thought about it, and I thought about it, and I thought about it, and I don't really have a definitive answer right now. Basically, Channel 3 Halifax has been in the conceptual stage for many, many years, and it's been in the developmental stage practically for the last 6 months. But it really is an idea. It's a dream. It's a vision. The idea is to bring people together, to share ideas, to share stories, to share our talents, to share our differences, and to experience things. It's pretty simple. I have a background in the theater, and I love the live dynamic of people coming together. And so I kind of conceived Channel 3 Halifax to be a digital stage where people can come on, do a little performance, share it with a small audience, but also broadcast it out to anybody who might be interested in viewing us online. And this is part of the whole new digital medium that we live in. And so it's kind of an amalgamation between the two ideas. But really, Channel 3 Halifax is the beginning of a story. And tonight is chapter 1 of that story. We have a preface, but this is chapter 1. And tonight marks the first time that we're actually going to try and actualize this concept and idea. And so it's a story. Let's begin with a story. It's an unfinished story. And by the way, we're looking for contributors. So if anyone wants to help build this story, we're welcome to any contributions that may come our way. Starting with storytelling in general, I want to begin with just a simple idea from Northrop Frye. And Northrop Frye talks about literature is a world where there is no reality except for that of the human imagination. And that's really what I want to focus on here with Channel 3 Halifax. I want to look at the human experience. I want us to connect with all of the experiences that we've amalgamated in our own lives and share them with each other, because I feel that that's what makes us human, and that's what joins us together. And it definitely separates us from AI content creation, which is a topic that I'd like to return to towards the end of our discussion. But for now, let's talk about storytelling. We're asking, who tells Halifax stories? I want to know where we find out information about what's going on in Halifax. And today we have 3 wonderful panelists. We have Paige from The Knitting Page. We have Elle Jones. And we have Cindy Campbell-Stone, a storyteller, a poet, an activist, a professor, a journalist. And we have a teacher, an athlete, and a knitter. All of 3 who are wonderful, wonderful storytellers. And tonight, we hope to hear a little bit about some of their storytelling. So I'd like to begin our conversation by asking our panelists, is there a story that really affected you when you were a kid that turned you into the storyteller you are today? Let's start with you, Paige.
Okay, so one book that first came to mind, I don't have it on hand since moving to Halifax, but was Something from Nothing. But I did end up bringing a book, and you can probably tell that my childhood was not too long ago. But this is Milk and Honey by Rupi Kaur, and this is a collection of poems. This was a book that got gifted to me by a dear friend who just turned 80. When I was in high school, going through a bit of a hard time, and Rupi Kaur, a lot of people have probably heard of her, famous woman activist, really into women's rights. And this book is mostly about like relationships and whatnot, breaking, getting broken up with, falling apart, healing. But I wound up pulling a couple poems from the healing chapter within this book because I found it to be really influential on both myself in terms of coming and like finding a place of self-love, I pulled one that talks about art and your form of art. As a knitter, I found that I didn't necessarily fit into a niche of art. I wasn't a visual artist. I wasn't on the theater. I did do dance growing up, but I had a tough relationship with dance due to an eating disorder I developed in high school. And I came to knitting during that time. So I can read the little passage.
Sure.
But the art poem goes, your art is not about how many people like your work. Your art is about if your heart likes your work, if your soul likes your work. It's about how honest you are with yourself, and you must never trade honesty for relatability. And I think especially in this past year, I've really led into showing up online as an authentic version of myself. I went through periods where I was trying to recreate what other people had already posted. And yes, I built some following and I got some traction, and I also established some creativity within that. But within the past 6 months, I've really just kind of let the cringe and embrace the cringe and move forward and post some stuff that's honestly quite satirical, but also cringy, that has really resonated with people. I think because of the fact that it's raw, vulnerable. It's not trying to act like someone I'm not. It's mixing both my passions of being an athlete and being a knitter. And I think I've really led into my creativity when it comes to knitting recently, and that there's other poems that I have highlighted in this book that I won't share all of them, but that I think just comes into really owning yourself and who I am, and trying to embrace who I am and loving myself first before trying to be anyone else. And that's really resonated with me recently.
How did you get into knitting, and did that influence your content creation, or was it the other way around?
So I got into knitting because I got gifted a learn to knit and learn to crochet kit for my 6th birthday, which was a rock star themed birthday. We hired my local guitar teacher who put on a whole rock show for us. We all sang and performed. It's somewhere on VHS, but I really want my parents to find it. But I got this kit, and on the kit, there was a little bag with flowers, and I just thought that was the cutest thing ever as a 6-year-old. And I said, Mom, I want to knit this bag. She goes, Paige, that's crochet. But that scarf over there in the little corner, I can teach you how to do that. And so my grandmother taught my mom how to knit. My mom taught me how to knit. That's oftentimes something that happens, is knitting is passed down through generations, oftentimes through women in a family line. So I learned to knit when I was 6, and I kind of took it up by storm. I wanted the fun cheetah fur from Michaels and the sparkly this and the sparkly that, bright colors, was just knitting squares and was look at my square. And so that was kind of what kept me from the age 6 to age 10. Took a little break. Middle school, I started knitting hats. But I was really determined to never follow a pattern. And so my hats were always oddly shaped. They were unique. I didn't know how to knit in the round, which is what I'm currently doing. And then took a break from that. I remember I gifted a hat to some boy I had a crush on in middle school. Thought it was the coolest thing ever. He'd wear it around school. I was like, I am in. And then in high school, started going through an eating disorder. And I also wound up getting injured at the time. And so I needed something to keep my hands busy, my mind busy, that wasn't contributing to this obsessive exercise and obsessive constriction, or restriction, not constriction. And so I wound up turning to my knitting. My mom was like, you really like to knit as a kid. Why don't you turn to your knitting? And so that's actually initially when I started the knitting page, was in high school. 2016, I think, is my first ever post. Knit for a bit, to the point where it was actually detrimental to my studies, because I was knitting so much. I was knitting in class. I don't know if my high school biology teacher and coach is listening, but Miss Stone would be like, okay, she's just knitting in bio class. But I was always fully engaged. I'd be answering all the questions, knitting away. That took a backseat. And then in teachers college, the days are quite long. I did the compressed program at Queen's University. And so I was at class from 8:30 until 5:30, 6 p.m. every day. And one other girl in my cohort was also knitting. And I was like, that's so smart, because instead of scrolling on your phone and engaging in the digital doom scroll, she's keeping her hands busy, but also engaging in the lectures. And I was like, I should bust out my knitting needles. And so I did. Actually borrowed a pair from her. I was like, I don't have any of my stuff. Do you happen to have something? She's like, oh, I've got you. Because if you're a knitter, you probably have all the things and then some to last a lifetime. got into knitting, started consuming knitting YouTube, and I was like, I think I could talk about this. Why not? Why not try? And so set up my phone camera and recorded a little video of me talking about what I like to knit and the projects I had on my needles, and it kind of developed from there. And so I haven't really stopped knitting since going through teachers college. I've had periods where I've knit less, periods where I knit more, but always knitting. Anytime I travel, I always look for a local yarn store to go buy some yarn, and then that yarn usually has memory of that trip, that experience that the yarn has, and then oftentimes knitting the project also carries a story as well of where you worked on it, what was inspired by it, what you were going through at that time. So you can kind of look back on every piece. And I did bring a collection of pieces today that kind of carry different moments throughout my early 20s that have either yarn that's important, or I finished it during a time like my graduation, or this is inspired by the local houses here in Halifax and the fun candy-colored houses that exist downtown. So yeah, that's kind of my forte into knitting. And then recently I was like, oh, I just feel like I'm more of a multidimensional person than just being a knitter. I'm like, I also really like to run. Actually, Elle and I run together outside of this as well. And I was like, I'm just going to post all about myself, and just kind of like lean into like not just knitting and not just running, but mixing the both up. And yeah.
Can you speak a little bit about what is Petal and Pearl?
Yes.
Because I have no idea about that.
So this past winter, my partner's here, and he's a big marathoner, and I had yet to do a marathon. And I was like, you know what? I was struggling with an injury, and I thought, this is really smart. I'm going to sign up for my first ever marathon while I'm injured, because all I have to do is cross the line, and it's an automatic PB, which is a personal best for those of you in the runner world. PB, PR if you're American. I was having a bit of an ego issue with trying to run like the races that I usually run, because I wasn't in that fitness. So I was like, if I do a marathon, well then if I just cross the line, I'm automatically winning, like in my PB. And so go to Thunder Bay, which is where my parents live, and I decided to take Jonathan on the trails that I loved. About 5K into this run, I roll my ankle. Quite bad. I'm crying, but it's like minus 15 because it's Thunder Bay in the wintertime. We're in the middle of a forest, and I'm like, I can't just stop. I'm also a very big sweater, so if I get cold, I get very cold because my sweat cools. It does its job perfectly. So I was like, okay, I gotta at least run. My parents were busy. They weren't answering their phone. I was like, what's the point of having a phone? And so ended up getting to a road. My dad answers. He comes and picks me up in the car. I'm crying. I'm like, man, I have 12 weeks until I'm supposed to run this marathon, and right now I can't even walk without pain. And I also had my dad's Christmas present that wasn't done. It's on my needles. And so I was like, I won an exercise bike by winning this mountain running race a few years back that I couldn't bring back on the plane, so it's still in my parents' basement. So I was like, okay, it's Christmas. I need to train for this marathon. I'm going to get on the bike. I'm going to finish my dad's sweater. And so I started knitting and I started biking. And then one day I was walking home from work later on. I'm still injured. I'm still not able to run. And I like alliteration. So I was trying to play with pedal, or trying to play with bike and other words in knitting. And so purl is a type of stitch in knitting. You've probably heard knit one, purl two is kind of a classic idiom that people say. And I was like, oh, pedal and purl. And so I was like, oh, and then I kind of got into this persona where I'm like this like silly fitness instructor biking. And I was like, I was kind of going through a hard time because I want to run, but I'm stuck on this bike. And I did all my training up until like the month before the marathon on my bike. And I was like, well, I'm doing something. Hopefully it translates. So I'd be like, if you've had a good day or a bad day, doesn't matter, like get on your bike, let's grab our knitting, let's get ready to pedal and purl. And it was just this like super silly, like satirical, like this is how I'd be if I was like a cycling instructor. Like I'd be super uplifting and motivating and like kind of over the top to the point where it was silly. And I just posted this reel. And I was like, whatever. I'm kind of cringing at myself for posting this. It's since gotten like 360,000 views, and like people messaging me, brands reaching out, being like, hey, like we see that you're doing this thing, and like there's a whole kind of community building, and that's already existed of people, especially women, that are interested in both like that artistic, creative craft side of themselves and also being an endurance athlete. And so Pedal and Pearl's just kind of taken off, and then I'd do little spoofs since, and I'd go on Zwift, which is like an online cycling platform where you hook up virtually, and I'm like racing some grandfather in Germany as I'm like knitting away, and then they have these things in Zwift where like just like the Tour de France, you can collect jerseys. So if you are the fastest woman or man to go through this segment in this virtual world, you can get that jersey. So I did challenges where I was trying to knit and also like steal the jersey and be the fastest person through that segment. And I just post these like silly little videos of myself just like leaning into having fun. It also made the time go by really quickly on the bike because I was often on the bike for like 2 to 3 hours to simulate a long run. And you can only stare at your little avatar for so long. And I was like, well, that's also 3 hours where I'm not knitting. But if I knit while I bike, 2 birds, 1 stone, I'm crushing both. So that's Pedal and Pearl.
And how have you built up your audiences in terms of building the stories that you want to tell through the content that you create?
Yeah, I think consistency's definitely helped in terms of when I post consistently and putting a face to the name, showing up authentically, not only talking about like the positives, but also sharing some negatives, although it's definitely harder to share and like feel comfortable sharing like hard times on social media than it is going through like good times. I do a knitting podcast on YouTube as well, where I'm also the knitting page, and I'll often try to embed other things going on in my life rather than just like only talking about knitting. So it's talking about like funny stories that have happened or like a race I've done recently, and I think that really builds that human connection and brings people wanting to come back, or like people are commenting like, oh my gosh, like I did one where recently watching the final stage of the Tour de France, and like multiple people commented and were like, that was such an epic finish, and it was like, yeah, it was, like that's crazy. And then also being able to share like tidbits of like, obviously I'm not like Tour de France level or anywhere close, but like your own personal successes, or people trying a triathlon for the first time, or trying a running race for the first time, or even trying pedaling and purling for the first time, and like inspiring people to like get on their bikes and knit. That I think that like that consistency and just showing up and experimenting as well with like what resonates, what doesn't, being okay like with some things absolutely flopping. Like I had no idea that video of Pedal and Pearl was gonna reach 300,000 people, but it did. And I think just kind of showing up authentically and like throwing like everything in the kitchen sink at it and just sharing funny little things, as well as like real things.
Real things.
Yeah, also helps. Like that got me through a really hard time of being injured in a way that like built community, shared stories. Yeah.
Wonderful. And now, Elle Jones.
There you go.
Is there a story that influenced you to become the person you are today?
I wouldn't say one story. I mean, there's a few things. That one, obviously, African people, my mother's from Trinidad, we all come from oral cultures. So that's just part of the life. Like my mother's storytelling about her family was really important. She always had this really strong family history. And then later in life, I realized that she was like making up the endings to make them more inspiring. Like she, tweaking them a little because, but she would tell us all these stories about, your great great uncle who was like in Edinburgh studying medicine in like 1830, and everybody thought brown bread was caused because he shed his skin on it. I don't know, like they were these like weird colonial stories, but like so. Really grounded in that. My grandfather was a calypsonian, which is the political music of Trinidad. So it's like the media, like telling. It's like the equivalent of social media back in the day, but they would do like this satiric political music that was a social commentary, and he did that. So obviously, I think that's in the blood. Church, I mean, that's a huge thing, right? Like that's where you hear so much language too, like. Leaving out the religion part, like just, like when you go out for communion, you're hearing all these like big words when you're little, and you sort of get that sense of language, I think, from church a lot, and like the storytelling around that and Bible stories and stuff like that. So, I think just growing up, music was big in my family as well. My father was a musician. My grandfather was a musician. So I think just that kind of combination of really like constant oral cultures, constant speaking. Like my mother would always, go to the encyclopedia. We did a lot of debating just with each other, like discussion. So coming from this like very oral, very argumentative, like very political culture, I think it was just so much part of just speaking and having to hold your own. So I think, yeah, that just kind of all created me. In my baby book, and you were going to talk about fairy tales, but mine says, Elle is very stubborn. If you tell her the sky is blue, she will tell you it's green, but very sensitive, really. When the witch dies in the story, she cries and cries. And I was like, yeah, it's like for witch justice. And I'm still like that. Like, I can't do, like, bad endings. So I was like, no, take the witch out of the oven. She didn't deserve that. So...
You express your voice in very different mediums. What kind of audiences are you trying to build?
I don't really, actually. Like, you can take it or leave it. So I don't really, I feel like I just do what I want to do, and then if people feel it and come to it, that's cool. But I don't really actually chase an audience, I wouldn't say, at this point in my life, perhaps. I think what I'm interested in is like when I'm talking about something, it's important to me that I'm responsible to those people. So when I wrote my book, which is a lot about prison stuff, I wanted the people in prison, especially the people whose stories I was telling, it was really important to me that they read it and that they felt represented correctly and that they gave permission for what I was talking about. So that's important to me. Speaking, I don't like to think that you speak on behalf of people. I think you speak with people. Someone once said to me, how do you just like get up on stage and say things relentlessly that make people so uncomfortable? And I was like, well, I don't feel like I'm saying them alone. I think that, people want me to say those things, and I'm speaking with that and with the permission and within that community. So I think that's really important to me, that I feel responsible for those stories. So yeah, like I think, but then I also, I think it's really important to, especially now, to speak with courage and to not, like, I don't really think about what people are going to receive. I always say that, like, I set it and forget it. I don't read the comments. I don't watch myself back. I don't care what people have to say about it. I care what the people I care about have to say and what their critique is and people I'm accountable to. But if I thought about all the people out there that obviously also have something to say, then I would be, like, I'd never be able to say anything. So it's just important to me to say what I think is right, to stand on my words, and then to be accountable to the people that it means something to. So that's what I try to do. But, yeah.
Great. Now, Cindy Campbell-Stone.
Oh, hello.
You've been a storyteller for a long time. You're representative of maritime culture. You're also a singer.
Yes.
Is there a story that influenced you to become who you are today?
There is actually a collection of stories that influenced me as an oral storyteller. I don't read my stories. I tell them from my head. I learn them, but then I don't memorize them, I just tell them. And one of the books, of course, is the Brothers Grimm, Grimm's Fairy Tales. It really influenced me as a kid. I loved some of the tales and I hated others, such as the ones that they throw the witch in the oven. So I'm there with you, Mel. And, or a Cinderella story where they cut the heels off to fit the stepsisters cut their heels off to fit their foot in the shoe, and in order to get the prince. But of course he discovers the blood that's dripping from their shoe, and I thought that was just gross when I was younger. And but I really enjoy the Brothers Grimm's tales. They are not for children, they are for adults, and they were written for adults, and the adults told these stories. Now the children might have heard them too, but the adults were really the ones who did the telling, and that's what the stories were for. So that is a written collection of stories that I read when I was younger. But I also learned some songs and stories from my family, similar to what Al was saying, that both my parents are from Prince Edward Island, and I would sit in my grandparents' big old country kitchen with the stove in the corner and the chairs all around and the coach in the corner, the other corner, and I would listen to the adults tell the stories of the community stories, like the crops that failed, or something funny that happened to a neighbor, or things like that, a fishing trip where someone drowned, so they were stories about people that I knew, and stories about my family. And so as a kid, I would sit in the corner, not say anything, so I wouldn't be sent to bed. And I would listen to these stories. And I'd hear some of the adult stories that I probably shouldn't have heard. But after the stories were told and people were chatting and talking, the songs would come out. And we'd start singing. And my uncle, he would sing some of the old songs. Now, these are like the ballad songs, the songs that go back for generations, for centuries. And he would start singing some of those songs. And to me, those songs told a story. And I was always fascinated by that story of the song. And sometimes I would make up a story that went with the song. And later in life, I told some of those stories that included the song as well. So that's where I got my stories from, and my passion for storytelling is from those two, from reading and from listening to other people tell stories.
And it's led to a career for you?
It has. Now I'm retired, so I can focus on telling my storytelling more. I worked in the public library for many years, so I was surrounded by stories then too. But I started my storytelling career in the public library, actually. I told stories to the kids and created a program called Shake, Rattle, and Read, which is for preschoolers, because oracy or oracy precedes literacy. And so the kids, when you're a preschooler, that's all you're hearing. You're hearing stuff. You're listening to people talking. And so I started storytelling to them, and I'd have a room full of 100 kids. Some were babies all the way up to age 5. And you know what? They listened. They listened to the stories, and they didn't move. And the first time I told the little red hen, I couldn't believe that even the babies were listening. And so I realized that there was a connection there between the storyteller and the listener. There's some sort of a magical kind of connection. And the listener is forming the images in their head. So that's the difference with oral storytelling, is I'm telling the story, but you as a listener, you all would have different images in your head. And I think that is a very valuable thing to have.
Yes. Part of your repertoire is ghost stories of the Maritimes.
Oh, yes, yes. I love ghost stories.
Is Nova Scotia haunted?
Oh, yes, yes. And one of the most haunted places in Nova Scotia is Annapolis Royal. And I know of a hotel that has a haunted bedroom in it, so, but I won't say what it is at the moment. So yes, there are a lot of ghost storytellers here in the province as well, and a lot of ghost stories being written. Vernon Oikel and Steve Vernon are two of my favorite storytellers. And myself, I love telling ghost stories because it gives me a thrill, and I love the supernatural and the unknown. It's like, what if that really was true? And so I'm always fascinated by ghost stories and the supernatural. And Helen Creighton actually is a person, she was a folklorist in the Maritime Provinces, and she wrote Blue Nose Ghosts. And I tell a lot of Blue Nose ghost stories from her book. Now, I elaborate on them a bit, and I put my own spin on things, but I love telling stories from her book. I just love that. And there's been a couple times I've added a scream, as Pat will know, to my stories that have had the whole audience going up and down in their seats. So yeah, I love scaring people.
Since you're one of the most experienced storytellers here, would you mind sharing a story with us now?
I could share a story. Wait, did you want a ghost story?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay, all right. I'll tell you a story from Annapolis Royal. In Annapolis Royal, there was a doctor, Dr. Robinson, many years ago. He was on a house call, and he was coming home from his house call, and it was a dark and stormy night. And the rain was just pouring down in buckets. And he was going along in his horse and buggy, when all of a sudden, he saw something up ahead. And he looked through the pouring rain, and he could see the figure of a woman, and she was all dressed in gray. and she was holding on to the bridle of the horse. Well, Dr. Robinson got down from his wagon, and he called out to her, "Hello, can I help you?" No answer. He took a few steps forward, and he said, "Are you hurt? I'm a doctor. I could help." No answer. So he took a couple steps forward, and all of a sudden, she disappeared. And he couldn't believe what he had seen, but he took hold of the horse's bridle, and the horse was very nervous, but he pulled the horse along until they came around the corner, and there was a bridge that had been washed out because of the pouring rain. And if it wasn't for that gray lady, Dr. Robinson and his horse could have been injured or killed.
Fabulous.
Thank you.
If that was a Caribbean ghost story, she'd have burned him up.
Would she?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Ours are all
Oh, I'd like to hear
about,
that one. Yeah.
Sequoia's burning men and stuff like that.
Where'd the story come from?
This story came from Blue Nose Ghosts.
Ah, nice.
Yeah.
Have you presented it a number of times?
Oh, yes, many times at Evergreen House, which is Helen's house, part of the Dartmouth Heritage Museum, at Quaker House, at the Cole Harbour Heritage Museum on the Ghostly Gala. And at Evergreen House, we have a program called The Unhinged Door, and it goes on every year, and you come and listen to ghost stories, or stories that will make the hair stand up in the back of your neck.
And why are the Maritimes full of ghost stories?
I think it's because of the many cultures that are here in the Maritimes. Every culture has their own ghost stories. And so many cultures have come by the sea to visit here or to settle here. But even the indigenous people, the Mi'kmaq, have their own ghost stories as well. So it's, I think, universal. It's a universal human thing as well. And I think we all wonder about the unknown, about what happens after death, about what happens with things that are unexplained. And I think it's definitely a universal phenomena that we all love a good ghost story.
Yes. Paige, what is it that you're knitting for us?
I am knitting I know it's probably can't believe this is a top. Oftentimes knitting projects don't really look like anything until they do, but this is a top that I'm not following a pattern. It's in my head, but I'm calling it the Chester top, informed by Chester, Nova Scotia. I feel like it'd be like a nice top to wear by the ocean. I've knit one sample in just all beige, but now this is not going to be my sad beige baby. This will be my fun little rainbow, scrappy, stripy version. So I picked it just because I'm just changing colors, but the actual process of what I'm making is pretty straightforward, so it's easy to do while I sit and listen and share stories.
And how do you tell a story through knitting?
How do you tell a story through knitting? Knitting actually was used in the wars as well. Oftentimes, so I'm going to grab one of my pieces that has lots of different texture going on. But this is the Philomena sweater. And so as you can see, there's a lot of different textures going on. And so actually in the wars, they had women that would knit and encode like words and messages within the textures of the knitting. So this one doesn't have any codes written in it. And I'm not specifically necessarily telling a story with this sweater in terms of the actual stitches, but for me, the knitting sometimes has stories within the stitches, but it's oftentimes the yarn and the process of knitting. So this sweater here probably took me 60, 70 hours to complete. It was a really long process. I knit on it basically exclusively for 6 weeks, before work, after work, sometimes at lunch. Jonathan and I went to Montreal and I worked a lot on this, so that was a little memory that's embedded within this. Sometimes you can have friends that work on projects as well, so they can have their memory and their stitches embedded in your work as well. There's oftentimes, I don't have one that specifically looks like it, but this one I designed. Well, I didn't design it. This is a pattern that already exists. It's called the Norma sweater, but this was inspired to look like the beach. So looking at imagery and trying to pick yarns that resemble colors and stories within it as well. A lot of the colorwork sweaters from Norway, for example, is little motifs that are used in. I don't have a finished one of those because they're quite the labor of love, but a lot of the motifs that are used, they can be like family heritage or sport specific, or they have a lot of meaning. And so you might have noticed in the Olympics this past year for the Winter Olympics, the Norwegian athletes, Dale of Norway is like a big company there. And so they have different sweaters that come out for every championship. And so that's also oftentimes a story that's involved. So there's motifs picked that you can do, changing colors within your knitting to emulate and represent things from a specific time or specific period or specific sport that carry meaning maybe to that knitter or to a group of people as a whole.
Oh, wonderful. All right, I'd like to kind of shift the conversation now a little bit and talk about who tells Halifax stories. And with Channel 3 Halifax, we did a bit of a survey, and it's an ongoing survey, trying to find out how people find out about information in the city. And the top three for finding information that we've found so far in our survey is that number one is Facebook, number two is family and friends, and number three is Instagram. Also, in terms of missing events, we found out that 22.7% frequently miss events, 68.2% sometimes miss events, and in terms of what type of local information you wish was easier to find, it was community issues, especially with 95.7 News Radio Halifax being shut down recently. So basically, in summary, we found that yes, people are looking online to find out what's going on, but they're sometimes missing it. And also that there isn't really a centralized place to find information. So just generally, how do the three of you find information about things going on in the city, things that you're interested in?
All the activist stuff is on Instagram, which is, but that's a big problem. I mean, we're always trying to talk about getting back the phone trees and like putting up posters and things that people used to do to get more turnout. Because yeah, it's true that you just think you can put something online, set and forget, and you can't. Like you actually have to reach out. So yeah, I would say most of the sort of political events end up on Instagram, but we think it's a problem. We always try to come up with other ways to do it. Halifax Examiner, I gotta put in a plug for the Halifax Examiner. I think, that's like just does an amazing job with the local news, local stories. But even stuff like what ships are in the harbor, they've covered that forever. So I used to work there, obviously. I used to do a column there. And yeah, I think that like when you're talking about losing the local voice, that is actually a huge political issue, right? That's not a coincidence that we don't have anybody covering the police board. If you don't have local journalists, you don't have people going to city council. That's our school funding, that's sewers, that's roads, that's the stuff that impacts our daily life, like basic bylaws. And we need actually to be paying attention to that because those meetings take place in the middle of the day, right? Like when I started going to police board, nobody was going. Like me and Harry actually just went randomly and nobody was going to those meetings. And they're just held at random times and like trying to use those meetings to hold people accountable was a whole experience, right? So it's actually, the more that things get consolidated into media in Toronto, it's not just that we lose our stories or even like our local approach. It's the very way that we are to know ourselves and our community and know when to show up and what's happening to us and how to fight back, that's being taken from us. So yeah, it's actually really, really important that if it's not gonna take place, like if we're not gonna have a city hall reporter being paid for them, we have to get out there and do it, right? Which is what people do on social media with their own TikToks and stuff. But yeah, like even more so, I think we have that responsibility because we're seeing that, like there's a direct attempt to consolidate news, to cut down local voices, to stop people from actually sharing information. And then if we don't understand and we don't have critical thought, then, all our arts get cut and then we're in the scenario we're in now, right? So.
Definitely, yeah. I would like to say I get my information from CBC, for sure. The Halifax Examiner is another great place to get news and information. And Facebook. Obviously, I have to get on Instagram because it seems like that's where it's happening. And but mostly it's just from people I know, people sharing information, sharing emails, word of mouth, so to speak. People really want to see community content, and they want to get involved in their communities. I'm involved in a couple of different museums, the Cole Harbour Heritage Museum and the Dartmouth Heritage Museum, and they have lots of wonderful programs that are being offered, and the Halifax Public Libraries as well, right? So I think people are starting to go to those places or inquire at those places as to what they have to offer. And I know I'm with the Helen Creighton Folklore Society as well as the Storytellers Circle of Halifax. And we offer 3 live programs a month. One is called the Folk Club, which is about folk music, and it's live entertainment. It's an open mic with a featured performer. And then and we encourage people to do songs from the Helen Creighton collection. And sometimes a story will happen there too. And then there's Trad Night, which is traditional music night, where you can come out and, again, you can choose something from the Helen Creighton collection or something from any other collection, and it's about ballads and the old songs and broadsides and things like that. And the same with Storytelling Night. It's a way to share stories, for people to share their stories. Now, some people share stories that are personal. Personal stories are very popular right now. I don't know if anybody's heard of the Moth storytelling in the States. And there's also a group here called Halifax Story Slam that does personal stories, and they have concerts, usually at the library. A couple times a year, but people are interested in telling their own personal stories or their family stories. But also there's the old traditional stories such as the folk tales, the fairy tales. You put your own twist on it. You can do a modern fairy tale, for instance. You know, but there's also community stories. People like to tell stories about their community, what it was like, you know, the north end of Halifax at a certain period of time. I know my mother used to have a great time. Godigan Street was the happening place just after the wars. She said that was a place to go. I didn't know that until she started to tell me these stories. And historical stories. I tell stories about the Halifax explosion, and these are stories about families, not the stories you necessarily hear in books or see in books about the facts. This is about real personal experiences that families have had in the Halifax explosion or any sort of a thing. It reminded me, I saw the Natal Day Parade the other day, and the Natal Day Parade in Preston. And I thought, that is a story there, because the Prestons used to be part of the Natal Day Parade for decades. And I thought, that's a great story there, right? How long that tradition has been going, and how long the people have stories that remember what it was like back when they, you know, used to be a kid in the parade or whatever. So those are the kinds of stories that I like to hear, because it makes a connection with people. And when people come out face to face at these live events, that they have that connection, they make that connection. And again, I spoke earlier about the listener having a connection with the teller or the performer, and you don't get that from anything else except live performing. And I think, and it's lovely to have the internet as well. And I have to say that it has its place too. For instance, during COVID, we couldn't do face-to-face storytelling, so we went online and did storytelling. And now online storytelling is happening all over the world. And I can listen to somebody in India telling stories online. So it's all good, it's all wonderful, it's all about making connection. Yeah.
How do you get kids who are so stuck to their devices interested in traditional storytelling and listening to stories?
Well, schools can help a lot with that. Parents can help by bringing the kids out to particular events. I wish the schools would use storytelling more. Again, it's this whole oracy or oralcy before literacy thing. You know, especially in the younger kids, before they even start to read, they can form a story in their head. and they can tell a story in their head. And the kids who have been read to, or the kids who have been told stories, are so into story by the time they get to start to read that it's easier for them to read, because they already know some of the rhythms and the patterns and the familiar words, and they know what word might come next because they've heard it, right? So it's, I really wish the schools could have more focus on oral storytelling. I know they do, but it's really hard for an oral storyteller to get into the schools, of course, because there's so many barriers now. So I think it's up to the parents now to bring the kids out to some of these storytelling sessions. Now, I also can go out to community centers or and family events and tell stories. I don't mind doing that either, to get kids introduced to storytelling. I love doing that kind of thing. So, and some of us storytellers in the circle do that kind of thing too. So it's not just me, this is why we do what we do, because we want to make the connection with all ages, anywhere from kids up to seniors, and it's just so important to tell people stories and for them to listen and feel again connection.
How do kids react when they finally find their voice in storytelling and they actually start using it?
They love it. They absolutely love it. They end up telling stories from their own lives, but also they can interview their parents or their grandparents and get their stories as well. So I know in schools that they do some of that, and interviewing your relatives is one of those most wonderful things you can do as a family member, is to collect those stories before they're gone. And I think kids have a wonderful role in doing that, and saving those stories and passing them on. And that's part of the reason why I storytell too, is so that the next generation can pass on the stories. And at our events that we have going on, I'm finding there's more younger people are getting more interested in coming out and listening to stories. So that's really encouraging. And for me, younger is quite anywhere from 66 down. But it is true. People, I think, want to experience things face to face. Yeah.
And hearing the voice as well, right?
Yes.
Because there's that energetic exchange that takes place.
Oh, sure. And to hear a kid tell a story, it's just, it gets you right here in the heart. It does. To hear a kid tell a story, and they're so excited when they're telling, and they're so into it. And sometimes they have no inhibitions at all. And it's really great. It's really great hearing them. It's very, very heartwarming. Very heartwarming indeed.
How do you encourage them to open up?
Just by introducing them to storytelling, and we have a program here that was cut, but it's now come back, Writers in the Schools program, and storytelling can be very similar to Writers in the School program, as you go in to the schools and you can encourage the kids to tell their own stories, and then to write those stories down if they so wish, or to record themselves telling a story. And I had a Blue Nose Ghosts storytelling session at the Alderley Landing Theatre years ago, where I went in and there was a sculptor who would do sculptures with the kids. But the sculptures were based on Blue Nose Ghosts, the book Blue Nose Ghosts. I would go in and I would tell the kids stories of Blue Nose Ghosts, and I'd pick those stories that would be perfect to make a sculpture out of. And the kids, I would tell them the stories, and then they would pick a story, and they would read a story. It was just a very one-sheet, couple paragraphs kind of a story from Blue Nose Ghosts. And they could have one of their leaders. Sometimes it was, we would have adults who are placed in with the kids, and the kids, if they couldn't read, could have the story read to them. And then they would get up with a microphone and they would tell the story to the rest of the group. And I had one, it was a Boys and Girls Club that came one year, and the kids were all a little bit, I don't know if they had ADHD, or they were very excitable. And I thought, this is going to be great, because I knew that those kids would be able to tell good stories. And sure enough, they did. And afterwards, one of the leaders came up to me and he said, I couldn't believe that everybody listened. He said, this changed us. And I was like, wow, wow. So it was a wonderful experience, really was. Highlight of my career. Yeah.
And that's why we are here talking about storytelling in general. But let's moving it to a more contemporary point. There is a movement now called Analog is the New Real, and it comes from the ideas of David Sachs, who started almost 10 years ago talking about the human response to AI and digital content creation. And why we talked about storytelling and why I brought you out here to talk about storytelling is because of that human connection that we're doing right now and that we've talked about in all of the experiences we've shared. So now that there seems to be a movement towards this, and I actually find it to be very interesting because we have been going in a more professional, AI, polished content sort of direction, and now there seems to be a backlash. And I wonder why that is. Do you have any ideas?
Like, why is there a backlash to AI?
Yes.
Because it sucks.
Why does it suck?
Well, I mean, even in a basic, like the whole point of, there's this thing that Steiner says, George Steiner, and he says, you know, your heart has touched someone's heart with no space in between. And as you said, like the whole point of, like whatever it is, activism, community work, it's your relationship to people and the work it takes to build that and what it takes to listen to people and how that changes you, right? So when I started going into prisons, and, you know, people are like, oh my God, like, what's the worst person you met in there? And you're like, you don't really, that's not the point. Like, you're not thinking about that. You're going in, and when you're writing together, there's something different that's happening, and they can be a different person than they are to their crime, right? Like, you receive them in a different way. You become a different person. You learn things like forgiveness and suspending judgment and really complex feelings that you have to work through, right? And like that is what happens when you actually engage with people, right? Like the art of journalism is about listening to people. Activism, I always say, is 90% listening and 10% not taking no for an answer, right? Like, so like that's such a fundamental human piece. Like stories come out of that, but I don't, like if I said, what do I think I do in my work? 90% of it is, yeah, like listening to people, caring about what they have to say, and then like caring that there's a just outcome, and then doing like what I have to do to make that happen. And so when you outsource that to like AI, which is built on data and cannibalizing people's books and then destroying them, which you can tell because AI still is not at the point where you can't tell it. Everything about that, it does matter. And it's not just like this thought experiment, oh, you know, like what if the robots became sane? Like it's not that, it's that there's something fundamentally going away from this thing that we've done for our entire human existence. Like everybody's going out to see the Odyssey right now. That's a 3,000-year-old plus story that still has meaning, and people are debating like the ways it's been adapted, and I don't know if I like this interpretation because this is a story that's been told thousands and thousands and thousands of times. We still have it, and what war meant those thousands of years ago and what it means to us now. Like you can't generate that anywhere else. That has to come from your personal relationship and your feeling and what you're trying to say to an audience, and having that perspective which comes over so many years of your own thought and your own engagement. So yeah, it's just like you can't just speed run that and think because there's words on a page that's the same thing as telling a story. Like that's just generating words. So, and the thought and the feeling and the humanity and everything that goes behind stories and that perspective, like that's what you're telling. And the outcome of what the story is in some way secondary, I think. So yeah, I mean, to me, just like, why would you want to abandon that? Why would you want to abandon having to, like all the things that happen when you go out in the world? I mean, again, to go back to the Odyssey, since that's the thing, like that's a whole metaphor for storytelling in itself, right? Going to the different islands and different stuff happens, like what happened on this island, and like everything's more ridiculous than the next, and like the gods are like that was a whole psychological and storytelling profile. The whole story of the Odyssey is about storytelling and like how stories come back and how you tell them. So that is, to me, that is just like, you can't have critical thought and you can't have a community if you don't have that. All these stories that we're hearing about that are being handed down from person to person to person, from culture to culture to culture, like how do you relate to your own family? You're told stories about them, and then that's broader, stories about like where my mom came from and where they come from, all the way back to enslavement. My father's Welsh. In their national anthem, it says lands of poets and singers, right? Like it's one of, I think, the only national anthems to mention poetry, because the Welsh are known for that, like storytelling. So I don't know, I'm going on a rant about it, but I just think that the point isn't to produce a product. The point of writing is actually to encounter yourself. And I always, when I talk to kids about like writing, I always say that, like it's matters that you believe in yourself and they believe in your own voice. And if you don't do that, you're not going to be able to speak, because you have to have that confidence in what your vision for your speaking is, and give yourself permission to say things you need to say. And that you can't escape that. You have to go through that process, which involves doubt and involves like checking your words and involves not liking what you wrote and erasing it and liking it later and reading it back, and not like that's all part of it. And that's how you actually discover what you sound like, and when you like what you sound like and when you don't. So I'll stop ranting about it, but yeah.
But on that note, would you mind sharing some of your own words with us?
Sure, I was like trying to, but then I'm like, I don't want to reach my phone, so I'll have to do what's in my head. So this is a poem about Africville. It's important to me, A, because it's about Africville and the stories, but B, because I also was able to, speaking of like how stories transmit, I was in the West Bank on a witnessing tour, speaking of stories. So we were going around, we were hosted by this group called Sabile, and they were taking us around to different communities where people were just welcoming us in. You know, they were cooking for us, we were staying with them, and we were witnessing what was happening to them. So it was very, very difficult. It was very emotional. You were going to checkpoints. You were going to people's homes that were being bulldozed. You were talking with victims of torture. So you had this happening alongside the most beautiful hospitality I've ever experienced, the most generosity. And during it, like, if you go to like Palestine, poets mean something to them. Like when you'd say I'm a poet, here you say I'm a poet, and people are like, oh, what are you gonna do with that? You know? But in Palestine, people are like, oh, poet. I write a bit of poetry myself, you know? So it was like meant so much. So when I said I was a poet and people wanted to hear, there was this just exchange that took place. So, and this is like taking place in refugee camps. So I was able to do this poem about what happened in Africville for people that are having their own homes bulldozed, and there was this connection being made. So that's also why it also became a more important poem to me after that. So it's kind of long, sorry, so you're gonna have to do some chopping and editing.
Okay.
It's in two parts. So the first part tells some of the story of Africville, and then the second part is like the resistance, and it was for a rally. So you'll get that sense when you talk about audience. It was in front of City Hall. My people, take heed how their plans do proceed. If you don't want black people to breed, then you don't let them read. And when a people can't read, then they can't sign the deed, and then you can take whatever you need. Take their land with no fee. They don't have to agree. And you can just claim whatever you steal, or maybe a place for their pets to go pee. And they run around the park while black people ain't free. If they build a place to pray, bulldoze it away. If they gather to learn, then let it all burn. Don't give them cash, dump your trash, and whatever they ask, tell them people like them just aren't up to the task. Don't give them jobs, let them rob, give them gums, watch the fun, watch their grandmothers sob, jail them all when you're done. Don't give them fees, let them screen, deprivation's the key, clean them out, screen them out, don't let them get a degree, move in, build the condos, and force them to leave, and whatever they achieve, find a way to go thieve. They're not homes, they're just shacks. There's no home when you're black. And through their backyard run the railroad tracks. Don't make them get services though they pay tax. Make them walk behind you with a weight on their back. And when they die, put their bodies away in the back. Garbage trucks are good enough for their stuff when they pack. So don't let them relax. Let them work till they crack, and crack down on them. Say that they pimp and sell crack. Relocate them by sewage and by the smokestacks. And when they become numbers and stats, tell them that's just the facts. They don't know why we won't die. But we're strong. We've survived. With all that they've tried to rule and divide, to control and deprive, but they haven't succeeded. In fact, we just rise like a garden they've weeded, like a forest revives once the fire's receded. They tell us we're inferior. We've never believed it. Judged by our skin and not our interiors, against the odds, plus with God, we are never defeated. With their greed, we've been cheated. Just look how we're treated. Slavery and Jim Crow, it's always repeated, and yet, with our sweat, with our faith, and our blood, if they don't pay the debt, they can't hold back the flood. Did you see us that summer all over their streets? But don't be fooled, we're not cool staying down on our knees. This is land that we're owed, and we're not saying please. And apologies, no, they are never enough. And no, not fake churches, we're calling your bluff. Give us land, reparations, we want back our stuff. Or did you forget that our people are tough? And there's new generations and they're coming up. And do you see our elders, the looks on their faces? So don't play your games with your cash and suitcases, with your maps. We're black people, you try to erase us? All this spirit, it never has faded. And we won't be persuaded. Too long we have waited. Justice won't be denied even though they've delayed it. And maybe we marched it or maybe we prayed it, but the arc of the universe always is weighted to justice, to freedom. It bends. We can make it. We've already come through the destruction and hatred, and I know that sundial don't catch the sun with the way it's positioned, but we all know what time it is. Don't get it twisted, and all your afflicted, convicted, victimized, and assistants, we're not how we're depicted. We're not afraid now. I don't know how you've missed it. And the blood in our veins is a powerful liquid. So when you see us out here all clapping and singing, you can hear that church bell that will always be ringing. It will always be ringing with the songs of the field. We're all standing up from the places we've kneeled, and our faith is our shield. Our spines made of steel. We've been raised in the dark. We're strategic and patient. The spark in our eyes is pure determination. Our ancestors have put you on notification. We won't stop till you give us our full reparations.
Thank you.
Now I actually messed that up. You wouldn't know, would you?
That's great.
Just keep it going.
Awesome.
Yeah, if you don't mind me, there was a question from the YouTube live chat.
Sure.
Let me just rephrase this. There's also a question on the YouTube live chat right now. And the question
Shout out
is
YouTube live
from
chat.
Pat Laker News. Yep. Question for L. Jones. What was one difficult part, if there was any, to write about in your book, Abolitionist Intimacies? Thanks.
I think it's one of those things where I think because you're not in prison. And so the weight is always like you can walk away at any time and the person experiencing it can't. And that's true for any human rights work. So you have to commit yourself to, like, they can't leave and they're stuck in it and you can leave. And so you have to kind of make that decision to walk every step. So I mean, it was just, especially when I started, it was just difficult. Like, you'd hear terrible things. I would cry all the time in the car. Like, and I'd make this time. I was driving to Acadia at the time, and I would literally be like, I can cry in the car, and then I'm getting out, and I have to go teach. I'd get like 5 minutes. So I would literally have to sort of be like, you can break down at this time, but then you got to be like ready to go into court, you know? And I got it, you know, like over time, you sort of adjust to it, I guess, which isn't always good. But, you know, you're hearing people on the phone. You don't see each other face to face. Sometimes they can't call. When they do call, like, you just hear terrible things and you can't always do something about it. So that was really difficult. And then, yeah, just feeling a responsibility to do something. I think that I never believe in words without action. I think the words are the start. And then through your words, you commit yourself further to more action. And especially, again, if you're not the victim, then you have an extra responsibility to do what you can. So yeah, I think, like, I don't know if anybody's read my book, Abolitionist Intimacies, but it's really like a decade of my life. And I'm like, that's the only good book I had in me. I don't have another one like that in me. I also feel like nobody read it. It's like the entire story of my adulthood. But yeah, I think that, and like, you feel a lot of guilt. I think you feel a lot of shame about not doing enough. And I think that's true in any sort of activist world, that I always used to be like, I will never burn out. And then all of a sudden you're just sad and depressed and can't make yourself do things. And you're like, oh yeah, okay, I guess hearing all these traumatic things for so many years did actually take it out of me. But yeah, I think the hardest thing is not being able to do something, that when something's unjust and you know it's unjust and you've committed yourself to fighting it and it takes so long. Randy Riley fighting that wrongful conviction. I mean, you just go through every emotion possible. That was like a decade. And, you know, we're welded together. Like, we're so tight. Our friendship is so tight, and we're so loyal to each other. And our love for each other from that experience, like, I can't even express how much you love somebody when you work through oppression with them. But, like, it's difficult. It's because you go through just feeling helpless, feeling powerless, feeling enraged. So, yeah, that's a long answer, but, yeah, I don't know. Thank you for reading my book. Shout out. The hardest thing of a book is you write it and then no one reads it. And then you're like, well, boo. Now what do I do?
And that's why we come back to storytelling, because it's all about sharing our stories with each other. And as we've discovered in tonight's discussion, it's about that exchange, that human exchange between people. And that's what separates us, I think, from the machines out there. And as we've been talking about this whole idea of analog being the new real, it's coming back to the idea that we're storytelling. And some of the new trends in even social media content creation is now going towards episodic storytelling, where viewers are going to come back again and again to follow your story and see it develop. But I think what it comes down to for all of us is that it is that human connection, and it is about hearing the voices of other people and feeling the energy as well. It's more than just words on a page. It's about the experiential nature of the entire experience. On that note, does anybody want to add anything to the topic of storytelling for tonight?
Sure. So some things that came up when you were speaking about storytelling in schools, and I think that as the kids get older, as someone that has worked from primary to grade 12, I think the content becomes it's become so much on the curriculum, and there seems to be less moments in the school for storytelling, for talking about current news, for talking about how you can get involved, and it's so much on curriculum and getting through it. As a teacher, I do try to build in those moments of storytelling and do lessons where I on Halloween, I told a ghost story where there's different clues hidden around the school, and each clue they had to solve a math problem because I teach math, and then it resulted in a letter that they then had to descramble, and it's probably one of the most engaged lessons I've ever given. And I think on the note of like AI and being face to face and having that human connection, is that I think COVID was really transformative in showing that like we don't like to be caged in our houses, only communicating through screens, that we want to be out on the streets, we want to hear the stories, we want to have that person-to-person connection, because that is where that community builds. That's where that you find out about news, you find out about local issues in your community that you can do something about as a human, not just through a screen. I think it's important to there is a time and place for it. I'm on social media, I share about things, but that I think at the end of the day, moving to Halifax, for someone that hasn't been here, I hear about the news through who I meet on the streets, through my neighbors, through my colleagues, through my friends that I've developed through running, through going to knit nights, because oftentimes when you move somewhere, you don't necessarily also know, the Halifax, the one that you were talking about, the Halifax Examiner. That's not something that would pop up. It's something that's built or you learn about through meeting people, and you don't necessarily have that coming up on a Google search. You're getting CBC, which I do love, to build that. But that at the end of the day, a lot of the stories, a lot of finding out that the Scotiabank Centre was on fire a while ago, that was through my neighbor saying, "Oh my gosh, did you hear about this?" Or through a colleague saying, "Oh my gosh, did you hear about this?" It wasn't first on the news because I wasn't involved in my phone, because I was in a face-to-face conversation, and that's where kind of those stories and news things came to my mind.
And yeah, really quickly too, and this is what I like about the work you do too, is I think a lot of people, especially once you're an adult, people feel like if they weren't a writer, they can't be a writer, or, oh, you're a poet, well, I can't do what you do. Oh, and I think it's really important that, yeah, stories, everybody is a storyteller in their own way. You were saying knitting is dancing, whatever it is. One thing I miss when I'm not in Nova Scotia is just the small talk. And it's so, there's that woman on TikTok that just calls people in Nova Scotia, random numbers and just chats to them. I don't know if anyone's seen that.
Yes,
TikTok.
I have.
Yeah. And that's like it's actually such an important thing, the way that people just chat to you in line about the weather or whatever. And there's this hill I used to run up by this like nursing home, and the same three things were said to me every day, which was harder up than down. Like, and then, wow, you're working hard, I'm tired just looking at you. You know what I mean? And like this every time you would just get the same thing said to you, but it's like charming, you know? And so I just think if people are listening, it's not about, you know, publishing your story or you have to be this or you have to be so articulate. It is like literally just like talking to your neighbor, talking to your family members. Don't let that go away. Don't that's the social bonds that we have. And that's actually how we get out of our own sphere, like our own head, our own only group of people. You know, you can go across so many boundaries just chatting to somebody about the weather that you would normally never talk to, right? So yeah, I just think it's really important that everybody like seizes their own story and sees themselves as a storyteller in their own way and feels confident to put that out in the world, because that's what we need.
The world needs more storytellers. Yes, I agree with that. What they said, for sure. But also, it's storytelling is the oldest meaning of storytelling is an oral one. And storytelling is as old as the first spoken word. And that may sound simple, but it's so true. And that is why, as human beings, we are hardwired in our brains to tell stories and to listen to stories. Our brain seeks that connection with other people, and our brain loves stories. And I think that's something we really need to keep in mind. Now, I just got back from Scotland. I took a trip about a month ago or so. And in Scotland, they have a wonderful storytelling community. Everybody tells stories everywhere. And they have a Scottish International Storytelling Centre. And this bag is from the Storytelling Centre. But there's a Scottish proverb that it tells at the end. It's at the very end of the bag. It says, stories are told eye to eye, heart to heart, and mind to mind.
And that's a perfect way to kind of end today's discussion, because that's what Channel 3 Halifax really aims to be. We aim to bring people together to share stories, to share experiences, to share human life. And that's the aim of this platform. So thank you all for coming here and sharing your stories with us and opening up the dialogue of telling stories here on Channel 3.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for getting this started.
And thanks to Michael and Matt for doing the technical and running the behind the scenes for Channel 3. Thanks
Thank
to our
you.
studio audience who came out to support. And thanks for giving us a good first run.
Yeah, thanks for
And
having
hopefully
us.
there'll be more stories to tell.
I'm sure there will. There's never an end.
Yes. Thank you very much. On behalf of all of us from Channel 3 Halifax, thank you for tuning in and have yourselves a good night. We'll see you next week.
Good night.
That's a wrap.